Aloha peeps, and welcome back to lesson 4 part 1. This is Bully from Bully's Painting Parlour, just rocking through some more airbrushing with you. In the last lesson we covered off basic pre-shading in terms of zenithal, highlighting white on top of a black primer. What I'm going to do now is actually talk you through the roadmap of pre-shading a model properly. So I'm going to be doing, I want Gorfang to be a kind of albino snake with some dark reds worked into it, and I figured actually this is an ideal opportunity to demonstrate on video, because we all know that white is an absolute ball ache to paint. So you can see in front of you what I call a roadmap. These are the first 4 colours I'll be using to plot the model, starting from Ishtar Pink from Fantasy Scale 75, and then Pink Flesh from Matte Scale 75, then Harvester Flesh and Moonray Flesh from the Fantasy range. The reason there's 2 different colours here is the Pink Flesh is a super matte, and I'm going to use that to add some texture into the blending, and the other 3 are standard kind of satin, the same style that you'll get with Citadel. At the end I'm going to want Gorfang to have a slightly wet look to it, the satiny look to it, just like you do with snakes. So what I'm going to start with is Ishtar Pink, which is quite a vibrant colour. And these are the 4 colours I'm going to use before I even start getting into anywhere close to whites. I'm always going to pop a spot down because I want to make sure that there's no gel and the colours properly mixed, and that's gone in fine. The Fantasy colours are an awful lot thinner than the Scale 75 super matte colours, so I'm only going to put a little bit of thinner into this and give it a good mix up, and what I'm left with is a very thin paint, which is exactly as we saw when I showed you how to mix paint using the Antares, and I've achieved that by doing much less thinner. So we're going to wipe that up before I end up with that all over my hands. We're going to do the same thing we always do, which is the acid test. So we're going to introduce air and we're going to pull some colour through onto the paper, and then we're going to try on our hand again, and I'm looking for a nice light even colour with no spattering and no spidering, and again we have nailed it first time. So that's a perfect consistency of paint to do this piece of work. So in order to pre-shade, what I'm going to do is turn it onto its other side now, where the darker piece is, and I'm going to just follow the lines of the darker colour quite lightly to start off with. And again I'm using short bursts of the airbrush as I don't want any tip dry, and I'm going to run in and pick out these darker areas. And you notice I'm coming in from underneath as opposed to on top, and the reason I'm coming in from underneath is I want to cut out some of this extreme black now and use it to help shade the translucent layer underneath, but you can still see there's quite a lot of the black coming through the paint because I'm using it thin and I'm using it translucent. So I'm going to flip it over now and I'm going to transfer the rest of this work here just around the underside of Gorfang's neck and chin. And then I'm going to work it back onto this side, and I'm going to come in a bit heavier with this paint now. Sometimes it's necessary for you to put a bit of extra paint through, just like open it up fully just to take the gunk out of the nozzle if you are getting any nozzle tip dry, and you can just drop it straight into the soapy water and give it a good swish around without immersing the paint cup and getting rid of the paint. Okay, this is coming in on top now, and I'm going to try and blend in the lighter colour to the darker colour, hit up on its head. At this point I'm not worried that there's a predominant pink, because that's going to be covered by about 30 other layers of paint. We're going to just concentrate now along the lower edges on his belly, and I'm going to really want that colour to be coming in a lot stronger on his belly and feathering up to the top, and that's because I want the underside of Gorfang to be that kind of soft reptilian colour that you get. So later on it's going to need to have a lighter base tone and a flesh coloured base tone. Okay, and I'm just going to cut in the underside of his jaw and work that up, and then we're going to take particular attention to come in around the eyes quite heavily and under the jawline, and we're going to do that now because if we don't do it now, we're going to struggle to get the right level of sort of soft fleshy colour that's going to be left as the reveal under the jawline. Okay, let me just put this down and turn the compressor off, and we'll try and come in a bit closer and have a look at it. Okay, so focus. Ah, brilliant, using an iPhone, it's so much fun. Okay, so here you can see what I've done now is strongly picked out the face on both sides. I have followed the shading around with this pink colour, but you can still see a great deal of the black coming through, except the areas that I wanted the light to catch. Across the top you can see quite a lot of the pink, and then in this deep recess of the neck bend you can still see a fairly great deal of the pre-shaded black and grey and white. Okay, so I'm going to just leave this to dry for a second. In fact, no, I won't. I'll show you how to use an airbrush to dry it just for speed. Whack the compressor back on, and then I'm just going to run air into it. You have to be careful you don't force the air around. At this stage it's still like, you don't force the paint around. At this stage it's still like a pigment with a brush, and you can push or pull it wherever you want to, and obviously using compressed air is even stronger than using a brush, so we don't want to be doing anything to force paint to go where we don't want it to. Okay, so let's put the paint, the defer back up here, and I'm going to actually, while I'm here, I'll just show you washing the brush again. So I'll hold it this time. I'm going to go into the water, going to run the airbrush, I'm going to mark it around with my hands. Oops. Okay, I'm going to pull some of the paint out in the cup. I'm going to back flush it, which throws the crap out of the needle. I'm going to get my finger in there just to get some of that scale that's dried out. I'm going to flush it through water. I'm going to back flush it by holding the needle again. You can do this by just sticking your finger over the end of whatever airbrush you want, or use one of those yellow cups I was talking about. We're going to run some fresh water through, we're going to test it on our hand, and we now know that there's nothing but water in there, so let's flick out the rest. Let's run some air through, just check on our hand again, nothing but clean water, and now nothing but air. So again, that airbrush is clean and ready for another colour. This is considerably quicker than the way most people will change colours for airbrushing. It works really, really well. And I used to do it the old-fashioned way. I used to do it the same way that everybody else does, using a little cup and running the thinners through it. And then one day I figured I would try this, and lo and behold, it worked. Okay, taking on the next colour, which is Pink Flesh. I should be able to get this colour on before I have to stop, because it's reached the limits of its video time for YouTube. So this is a nice thick gelatinous paint. Again, it's one of those really heavy scale colours. So I'm going to get, camera. Nope, can't see it. Sorry about the lighting and stuff. It's not a studio, obviously. I'm going to put a fair bit of this stuff in. A couple of squirts. I'm going to give it a really good mix up. Careful to draw in all the colour. And as we talked about with the Antares, scale 75 Ultra Mattes, gel based, so they're going to need a bit more work. And again, what I've done is, let's just put this down. What I've produced is a thin paint. So what I really want is this is, you know, almost one step off a glaze. So it's actually thinner than the Antares we did earlier, but it's fine. It's what I want it to be. But we know that it's thinner, so I'm probably going to have to drop the pressure on the airbrush a little bit, because obviously the thinner the paint, the lower the pressure. But let's do our little test. So, okay, I can't show you on the white bit. If you watch this now on my hand, you'll see what happens when you run a thin paint with too much air pressure. It's just turning into a pool of goo and doing what we call spidering out. So we know that this pressure is way too high for this paint. So what I'm going to do now is drop the compressor, and I'm going to drop the compressor down to 15 psi, which is considerably slower. And there we're left with a nice translucent covering and no spidering. Okay, So I'm going to come back up, and now I'm going to hit in the transitional areas between the shadows. So I'm specifically going to follow very lightly the line of the black and grey up onto the jawline, and then I'm going to cover off the top and work down. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to do the raised upper areas, and I'm going to work on this black and grey again, because I want all that to be gone now. Whilst it's gone in terms of its colour spectrum, it's not gone in terms of the impact it's had on the model. It keeps that kind of very heavy shading in those areas. We're just going to work on these bits of the frills here, because they've just need to be neutralised out a little bit. Looks a bit phallic at the minute, doesn't it? Like a big worm. Okay, so we've now got a pink dragon, which is a bit random, and obviously not what I'm going for. I don't want a pink dragon, but you'll see the methodology behind why there's a pink dragon. Working on the flesh tones. Okay, fine. Just going to leave that to dry again now, and I'm going to end this video here at 11 minutes 21. We'll come back with lesson 4 part 2 in a moment.